Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for watching. I'm Matt Reardon. This is your Tuesday morning, March 25th weather update. Now, as far as this morning goes, Tuesday, it's pretty quiet. We started here with infrared satellite imagery just a bit before sunrise here, so I started with that. If I showed you radar, or comparatively kind of the all hazards map that we typically show, which is the watches, the warnings and advisories from NOAA, it would paint the same story. Not too much weather to talk about here immediately on Tuesday. I'm going to make the case in this video that that's likely to change over the next 48 to 72 hours. I think that persists into the weekend as well. And I'm going to compare this year, what we're seeing in 25, maybe what we saw in 24, which was a very active April, and compare it to some recent years, maybe in the past 20, recent memory, and make the case that it could be an active April in terms of severe weather. We'll do this a bit in the video. Before that, I want to talk about some temperature roller coasting that we have to go through here on the central U.S., and then talk about some Texas rainfall as well. Before I do that, while I did make the case it's quiet here as of this morning, something we've been talking about even last week was the cooler temperatures expected to move in kind of the middle of this week for parts of the Midwest and the eastern U.S. If we just look at valid morning temperatures here around the recording of this video, so looking at near 6 a.m. Central Time, see those freezing temperature, that line, the contour in blue here, pushing into portions of the eastern Corn Belt, much of Michigan, much colder in Wisconsin, and portions of the upper Corn Belt as well. Now, relief is coming to this. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if I jump over and just show you the jet stream level winds valid as of this morning, again, invite you to go to the site. Always need to kind of play around with the different tools here. If you come and click on the Earth on the bottom, it is earth.nullschool.net. Really what we can see here, big picture, across North America, which we can see here kind of in the middle of the screen here, I'll outline the coastlines there, is this dominant upper level ridge out west. We've seen some early week warmth there, moving into a ridge in the central and eastern U.S., and that's bringing in our cold air kind of on the backside of the system that we've been in early this week. And it's kind of this setup that is the reason we're quiet here this week. And it's kind of critically here, if you look at the polar branch of the jet stream, that is this branch flowing more toward the North Pole, there's this subtropical jet stream that's still disconnected from it for now, but we'll still have to contend with this as we go through the next week, I think into April as well. And I'll talk about why that might be the case here as we go through the next few slides. But at least here on Tuesday, relatively quiet weather to talk about. We just peek over the last 24 hours of precipitation. Again, as you'd expect, we're pretty quiet maps in Pacific Northwest precip. Saw some storms move through portions of the southern U.S. yesterday. Kind of wind reports surrounding Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we saw some severe thunderstorm reports, but otherwise not too much to write home about. If we look at the valid radar as of this morning, some lingering showers moving through the Ohio River Valley, but these are light. Not all of these returns here are making it to the ground in the form of rainfall observations here overnight. Nonetheless, that's just about it. If you look around, just some lingering showers stretching all the way up into the northern plains. But again, continue with that kind of quiet theme here this morning. Now, I mentioned that's likely to change. To kind of set that up, we'll take a look at the upper level height pattern. This is the 500 millibar anomaly forecast from the ECMWF AIFS. So I'm going to make this valid here 7 a.m. this morning, right around the recording of this video. And it shows us the trough ridge pattern that we're dealing with here early in the week. We have this ridge out west. We're seeing warm temperatures out there, almost kind of early summer-like warmth for areas of California and the Pacific Northwest. Seeing that trough in the east. I'm going to take this forecast forward just a bit here. We'll go through Tuesday afternoon, and then into Wednesday morning. I'll make this valid as of 24 hours from now. And that ridge is starting to shift toward the east over the Continental Divide. It's going to continue that journey through the rest of this work week into the central U.S. and then the eastern U.S. as we get closer toward this weekend, and those warm temperatures are going to follow it. We'll take a look at that in just a second. Another thing to note is this potent trough that's now developing off the coast of California and Oregon. We'll have to fend with that on Wednesday and then Thursday for the Pacific Northwest. And then it's subtle here, but there's this little cutoff low that's sneaking under this upper level ridge. That is not an uncommon pattern to see these kind of cutoff lows sneak in to portions of either southern California or northern Mexico. This is actually going to be a rainmaker and a weather maker for much of southern and south central Texas that we'll have to talk about as well. Now, kind of immediately, the first kind of apparent effect of this ridge moving off to the east is the temperatures that are warm now in the western U.S. are going to move, again, over the Intermountain West on Wednesday. These are the high temperatures here, and I'll actually pull this out just a bit. So our high temperatures here Tuesday, you can see all the warmth in the western U.S. and portions of Texas, cold in the Midwest and the eastern Corn Belt. So we shift to Wednesday, you can see that pattern slowly shifting toward the east. That's even more apparent on Thursday, March 27th. Warm temperatures now getting into the Midwest and central U.S. proper here on Friday, March 28th. Before Saturday, moving further east, and ultimately by Sunday, and then Monday of next week, making their way all the way across. Now we're back on the other side of that temperature roller coaster, if you will, in portions of the Midwest. Now, and kind of bringing those temperatures across quickly, you could maybe presume that we might be dealing with a storm system here, a cold front here over the Midwest on Saturday and Sunday. And we are. That's going to be our next kind of big weather maker that we'll have to talk about that. We'll get into a few slides here. Before I do that, I did mention that cutoff low moving through Texas. So I wanted to show you the NAM radar forecast as we go through the middle of the work week here. This is the forecast here valid as of Tuesday morning. And as I just take this into this afternoon, not too much to talk about across Texas. That's going to change as we get into Wednesday p.m. So after lunchtime Wednesday, that cutoff low over northern Mexico around dinner time starting to throw off storms with the higher elevations in southwest Texas and northern Mexico. Some of these bleeding in across the river into southern Texas and west Texas. Could see some severe weather reports, at least isolated from the system as it comes through. I think that intensity kind of picks up as we get into Thursday. This is Thursday morning now, 8 a.m. Now, I don't know if we'll be as widespread in terms of thunderstorms so early on Thursday morning, but nonetheless, the potential's there for isolated severe thunderstorm reports and just precipitation, maybe some hail as well to talk about for much of south central and southern Texas as we go through the day Thursday again. You see this kind of plume of moisture, showers, thunderstorms across portions of central and even northern Texas. This is getting through lunchtime on Thursday, but it's possible another round of these develops near the river and that elevation as we go through Thursday afternoon. If we just look at the WPC, their prediction for rainfall totals all the way through this work week, but this contains much of what we're likely to see Wednesday, Thursday, perhaps lingering Friday. These are pretty significant totals. You're talking 4 inches plus in portions of southern Texas, anywhere from half an inch or more from an area of Lubbock over toward the Dallas-Fort Worth area and then south and east of there. And this is an area where we've seen dryness pick up. I mean, we've been talking about dust storms more so out of the West Texas, kind of eastern New Mexico, Oklahoma Panhandle area. But nonetheless, there's some areas here that could use this moisture, just hoping it doesn't come in the form of hail or too many severe reports as well. If we look at the Storm Prediction Center, their convective outlook, again, this is for day 3. This is their Thursday PM outlook, and you can see that area along the river where you're likely to more see those isolated potential hail reports and kind of a marginal hail risk as well across portions of far eastern Nebraska stretching over toward Indiana. That would be Thursday as well. Now, another piece I wanted to talk about, I mentioned it briefly, was that potent low off the coast of Oregon, Washington, Northern California. That's potentially a hail story as well. Now, you might be thinking hail, Pacific Northwest. Those two things don't really go together. And you're right, not too often. But as I play this forecast forward, we'll go through the day today. That trough's still a bit onshore, but as we get into Wednesday morning, you can start to see the effects of that come onshore in Northern California, portions of Oregon. And by 4 p.m. Wednesday afternoon, and then 5 p.m. dinner time, you see some potent precip forecast here from the 3-kilometer NAM. And if we actually jump over and look at the simulated radar, just to kind of get an idea of what's really going on here, I'll take us all the way again. Let's do 4 p.m. Wednesday. And we're seeing some of these, what we call convecting allowing models. That is the models that can resolve these individual thunderstorms. There are some impressive thunderstorm profiles associated with some of these, particularly for hail. And so it would not shock me if portions of the Willamette Valley, even up into the Seattle-Tacoma area, more so maybe further east, including areas in the rain shadow here and over portions of central Washington, Oregon, maybe even up towards Spokane, see some widespread hail reports here. It's hard to say how large some of this hail might be in some of these elevations. It tends to be pretty small, where it can accumulate very quickly and actually cause some issues, just how quickly it accumulates. But I think we'll likely see by the end of the day, Wednesday, a rare kind of widespread hail event just based on some of the thunderstorm profiles here. The Storm Prediction Center and their day 2 outlook, that's for Wednesday afternoon. So if we can zoom this in a little bit better here. They have a marginal risk out from, again, this Seattle-Tacoma area through much of the Willamette Valley over through central and eastern Oregon, again, likely including up here in Spokane as well. So curious to see here, again, kind of a rare area for that, but nonetheless, something I'll be watching out for as we go through the day tomorrow. Now I'm going to jump back. Again, this is that AFS trough ridge forecast I just showed you earlier. We kind of worked ourselves through the severe weather threat on Wednesday and Thursday across different parts of the U.S. You can see that trough now positioned across the Northwest on Friday, very early Friday morning. As I take this forecast into Saturday and all the way to 7 p.m. Sunday, this trough's still here. It's kind of parked, and it's been throwing off these little shortwave troughs, as we call them. This would be a long wave trough. You can see how much longer it is than these little, what do you call appendages that come racing through the central U.S. And now all the while, Through this work week, we were building that ridging into the central and eastern U.S. I just mentioned how that ridging is going to be translating from the central U.S. over to the eastern U.S., and that's going to bring in those warm temperatures. It's going to allow moisture and instability to return to the central and eastern U.S., and as these shortwave troughs come through, we'll have to be keeping an eye on these for some severe weather as they come through on first Sunday and then Monday. Storm Prediction Center, if we jump out and look at their Sunday outlook, that would be their day 6 outlook, a wide area of potential concern. Again, not a lot of details available, just early here in the forecast. The fact that they've highlighted such a broad area across the middle Mississippi and Ohio River valleys suggests we'll have to keep an eye on those shortwave troughs as they come across. I will say that kind of cutoff low out ahead of it on Wednesday and Thursday that we just talked about coming out of Texas, and I'll change my kind of cursor color there. I would think that would help to reduce some of the instability ultimately for a Sunday event. The reason I say that is when you put a low pressure system here, even kind of a weak one that cuts out here, it can pull some of that moisture back down and muddy that return flow, as we call it, out of the Gulf of Mexico back up into the central U.S. Now, the degree to which it does that and reduces this threat is just not clear yet. So that's why you see this kind of wide area of potential severe threat on Sunday, and then Monday even kind of further away from that low pressure system near Texas, just in terms of time. So there is that threat that we'll have to follow this weekend. And if I take that forecast out further from the AFS, well, that trough's not going anywhere. In fact, it's amplifying through the next work week. It's positioning itself more so over the western U.S. It's going to bring inclement weather there, potentially a return of snowfall chances, cold weather to California, more Sierra Nevada snowpack. We talked about the Miracle March. I'm not saying it's going to be a Miracle April, but I just mentioned, we typically start thinking about snow melting in April, not necessarily more of it for the western U.S., but really kind of the implications for the central and eastern U.S. is this is a pattern that, as we transition into April, is conducive for severe weather for all the reasons that we just talked about. And we're seeing that risk pick up almost right as the calendar turns on Sunday into Monday. And the reason I'm concerned about this, we've talked about the drought over the southwestern U.S. and northern Mexico. This is an area where we source a lot of the dry air. That's one of our big ingredients when we talk about severe weather setups. Certainly in April across the central, eastern, or southeastern U.S., you combine that right with the cold air coming out of Canada, that warm, moist Gulf air, that return flow that we just mentioned and talk about. And that's your recipe for some of these severe weather and tornado setups and potential outbreaks. We've seen that in April's past. We're kind of seeing those ingredients come together here. Another factor in this is the Madden-Julian oscillation. It has been living for much of the last kind of 30 to 40 days over in this area here, either the Western Pacific or the Western Hemisphere. It briefly kind of transitioned around the Eastern Hemisphere, but it's worked its way back into the Pacific and ultimately likely heading back closer to the Western Hemisphere here. And with a forecast to not really exit this region too quickly, I think this is playing a role in the more active subtropical jet that we talked about. If we kind of look at some analogs, when this MJO is active in these phases, we tend to see phase 8 in April troughing across the western U.S. That's what this analog is showing us here, ridging across the Great Lakes or portions of eastern Canada, allowing that return flow to get in, that Gulf moisture to push into the central or eastern U.S. That troughing here organizing over that drier concern, and portions of the southwest potentially bringing those dry lines further east than not. Another way to look at this is if we forecast that trough ridge pattern simply based on forcing from the MJO, a different way we can do that, and I take this into the middle of April here. We're looking at is North America here. We're looking at this forecasted trough ridge pattern, at least just looking exclusively at MJO analogs. You can see that troughing here across the western U.S., ridging across portions of either Greenland or eastern Canada here. Again, these patterns, the trough out west, the dry concern over portions of northern Mexico, both concerns that we talked about even earlier this spring for severe weather potential. We talked about the latest outlook from the Climate Prediction Center for all of April of 2025 and that kind of bullseye over portions of the middle Mississippi River Valley and the I-states. The dry concern over the southwest. Again, these kind of ingredients coming together for more active severe weather as we go through April. The National Severe Storms Laboratory, they have this neat machine learning severe probability forecast here. Now, it's not perfect. It's experimental in some ways, but it's going to help us, I think, highlight some of these risk areas as we go through the next kind of 10 to 14 days here. And you'll see this kind of overlap with some of the forecasts that we just talked about. First, Wednesday afternoon here. Again, we're typically on a map or a forecast like this looking across the central and eastern U.S. So the fact that we quickly see a highlighted area on Wednesday for the Willamette Valley portions of Washington, that kind of gives us a sense where something might be up here tomorrow afternoon. So again, keep an eye on the weather out here, particularly for hail across the Pacific Northwest. As we transition into Thursday, that was the same area we talked about, the southern U.S., or I should say southern Texas, off the river severe storm threat, and that's lining up nicely here with this forecast. We also talked about that potential kind of marginal hail threat across portions of the plains and the Corn Belt. Friday, I think it might be overdoing some of the risk here. This is kind of a small area, maybe an artifact in the model, but what we're really seeing kind of Friday and Saturday is this buildup of ingredients across the central U.S., which likely comes to a head here on Sunday. You can see a wide risk area potential over the middle Mississippi River Valley, pretty lining up closely with that SPC risk area that we talked about. That transitions more so toward the east, perhaps portions of the southeast on Monday. And again, this is an experimental forecast, so we're just going to let it run into Tuesday and then Wednesday of next week. You can see, again, a wide area on Thursday transitioning to Friday, unfortunately over the same area that we talked about potentially being a concern on Sunday. And that sets us up, I think, for the general story of next week, where Sunday, Monday, we have active severe weather concerns to talk about. There's likely this reloading period in the middle of the week where temperatures come down a bit for the central and eastern U.S., likely reintroducing some freeze or frost concerns for portions of the upper Midwest, the central or eastern Corn Belt, either Tuesday or Wednesday morning. But ultimately, something of a reloading, getting that Gulf moisture back into here toward the end of the week. Again, too early to talk specifics here. Just the fact that these forecasts are highlighting kind of a wide area of severe weather concern all the way at the end of next week, I think beckons to perhaps a more concerning April. I'm going to put this all together. We'll take a look at the precipitation forecast from the ECMWF here. I'll make this valid. Let's do 7 a.m. Tuesday morning, again, at the recording of this video. Take it through tonight. This is all the way to midnight tonight. Again, not much to talk about here on Tuesday. That lines up with the quiet weather that we've been discussing. Wednesday afternoon, we talked about the potential storms starting here near the Rio Grande, and the potential severe storms that we're talking about in the Pacific Northwest. So we take this into, let's do Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, 7 p.m., more widespread precipitation, non-severe in terms of thunderstorms, but certainly more heavy rain, some high winds here across portions of the Pacific Northwest. That severe weather potential across portions of southern and south central Texas, and then that marginal potential hail threat across portions of the Corn Belt on Thursday afternoon. So we transition into Friday morning and then Friday afternoon, precipitation lingering across the Northwest, precipitation lingering across eastern Texas, potentially some valuable rains there. That activity moving in on Saturday to portions of Louisiana. This is early Saturday morning. More widespread precipitation across portions of the upper Midwest and the Central Plains on Saturday afternoon. Likely looking at more so of the severe threat materializing Sunday afternoon. Now 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. Sunday afternoon, can see this low pressure system consolidating really across much of the Corn Belt here, and the potential for severe weather likely in here somewhere. If you see this kind of the lack of precipitation here along what would be that cold front, again, this might be, at least this ECMWF running, struggling to get moisture back up into this risk area here behind that initial low pressure system that we saw come out of Texas here. That's kind of one area of or a failure mode or a reason to reduce the risk here across the central U.S. It's far enough out in the forecast that those details aren't clear yet. Either way, as we transition from that Sunday into Monday, this is Monday morning, and now Monday evening at 7 p.m., could see that severe threat push off more so toward the south and east with more kind of confident initiation here, at least across portions of the Gulf states, something to keep an eye on as we head toward the weekend. I mentioned after that, likely seeing a lull in that activity through the middle of the week behind that system this weekend, likely to see those kind of frost and freeze chances return to portions of the upper Midwest, central and eastern Corn Belt. But as we kind of go through the rest of the next work week, again, I don't want to put any kind of Sharpie in this forecast here, but likely seeing a reconsolidation of that severe weather potential low pressure system moving through the central U.S. on Thursday or into Friday at the end of the next work week. That lines up the areas that we were just talking about in terms of that severe weather. I talked about the middle Mississippi River Valley. I talked about the southeast. That's been a consistent theme that we've talked about in March. B, it lines up with some of these April forecasts, which have been bullish for severe weather in the U.S., but not over what we'll call our traditional tornado alley, that is portions of Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, or even West Texas, more so over the middle Mississippi River Valley, maybe portions of the southeast. And that, again, it highlights two concerns. One, that concern with the severe weather over these areas where higher than average precipitation is forecast from the extended ECMWF forecast I'm showing you here. And then that kind of same concern over here in the west is that an increase in that southern dryness, which has been increasing quickly over the last 4, 8, and 12 weeks on the drought monitor. So there's really been nothing in the forecast, nothing in the pattern to kind of change my concern here. Now, something else I want to talk about as we kind of flip through this forecast quickly is the west stayed busy. I'll take this forecast all the way here on Tuesday. We'll go into Wednesday. We talked about the Pacific Northwest, the precipitation there as we went toward this weekend. But if we go into Monday of next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, seeing another low pressure system move into portions of the Pacific Northwest near the early to middle part of next week. More Sierra Nevada snow, particularly in the central and northern Sierras. But even potentially by Wednesday evening of next week, it's too early to talk specifics, but there's certainly potential here for widespread mountainous snowfall and potentially even rainfall in portions of the Central Valley, Central California coast. If I take this forecast a little bit further, some of that trying to push in even towards southern portions of the state of California here. So again, this kind of April, March, not something we typically talk about, but we're seeing it here on the extended forecast kind of baked into this latest run from the ECMWF. And that lines up again with that MJO conversation that we just talked about. When we see it transition across the Pacific over toward the Western Hemisphere, typically the West is more active. And when I think about kind of the past Aprils where we've seen active severe weather in the central or eastern U.S., I just went through the last kind of 20 years, modern memory of some of these bigger tornado outbreaks, some of these more active severe weather Aprils. 2024 certainly qualified. It was a huge year for tornado reports across the U.S. that started kind of more so in a big way in eastern Nebraska, portions of western Iowa, and it lasted into portions of May as well. And I just went back through every year where I found similar activity. So I went in 2024, 2006 was a big year. 2020 was big in portions of the southeastern U.S. specifically. 2012, kind of a big year for hail, but there were some significant outbreaks of tornadoes that year, unfortunately, in April. And then 2011 goes without saying, the one that contained the super outbreak from April 27th of 2011. And I kind of asked that what was the April pattern like in all these relatively active April years for severe weather and for tornadoes. And I got a pretty predictable result. One, we see troughing position across the western U.S. That's kind of what we call this negative P&A pattern, where you see troughing here, maybe positioned over portions of Eureka, California. We see ridging over the Hudson Bay, eastern Canada, maybe extending over toward Greenland. This allowing that return flow, that Gulf moisture, to take advantage of that jet stream troughing across the western U.S. We talked about the potential of the drought plays in northern Mexico and the southwestern U.S., and then this ridging north of Hawaii here. And even if I just go back, let's see if I can find that. If I look at some of these analogs here from the MJO, the troughing across the west, that ridging across Canada from some of these forecasts here. Take this forecast out into April. Let's just do the middle of the month here. Ridging north of Hawaii, troughing across the western U.S., ridging across portions of Greenland and eastern Canada here. And I think I even have, let's see if I can pull up that AIFS forecast that we've been talking about, which is somewhere in here, if you'll bear with me. And I'm going to take this forecast well out into early April here. This is Monday, April 7th. Troughing across the western U.S., ridging north of Hawaii, ridging over eastern Canada, and portions of the Hudson Bay as well. If we jump over, just kind of wrap this thing up, I'll look at the Climate Prediction Center, the various 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlook. If we look at precipitation here, again, this is getting out through the weekend and then to the next work week here. I'll blow this up into its own page. See the bullseye here for portions of central California and then the eastern U.S. Unfortunately, that continued dryness for portions of the southeast. We jump back here and make this the 8 to 14 day outlook, even getting further out into next work week. See that activity continuing for the western U.S. and portions of the central Corn Belt and the northeast. But again, this kind of lingering dryness concern in April for portions of the southern high plains, even extending over toward the southeast. Now, we could see severe weather in here. We talked about that potential on Monday, but there's been pockets in here where we've been dry. We talked about wildfire concerns, red flag warnings. There's grass fires south of Homestead, Florida. We saw fire concerns in South Carolina and the Carolinas proper, or I should say more broadly this year, and that extending along kind of the Gulf Coast area. So that's an area I'm watching as well over the kind of next 10 to 14 days as we head through April. I took that AIFS forecast, which I started the forecast with, and I just said, show me the precipitation anomalies all the way out over the next 14 days. Again, the details here are going to be hard to parse out, but the kind of broad picture here is California, wet over the next 2 weeks. That includes much of the Northwest and Pacific Northwest as well. The southern Texas kind of bullseye that you can see there, we just talked about that. That's coming here over the next 48 to 72 hours, some needed rainfall in some of the areas there. We'll see how far some of those storms and showers push up into the northern portions of the state, where some of that drought has been more recent. We see the Middle Mississippi River Valley, the Eastern Corn Belt. Again, this area of potential focus for severe weather highlighted here. Again, some of that may push into portions of the Southeast or Carolinas, but some of those forecasts, even on Monday, showed more isolated thunderstorm development where they could be severe underneath the thunderstorms, but you're lacking that widespread precipitation push. And this is an area I don't want to ignore. We've been talking about kind of the dust storms out here, but just as often it seems wildfire concerns have popped up here across portions of Florida and the Southeast. And as we head through spring into summer, that'll be a concern as well. If we just look at topsoil moisture right now, this is just the top layer. I think it kind of highlights some of what we're seeing in the Carolinas and Florida as well. If we last another 14 days with the lack of significant precip through that area, likely to see this dryness start to expand. And it goes without saying, dry across portions of the central and southern plains, keeping an eye on the northern plains as well. We'll wrap up here, just look at the 4-week change of the drought monitor. We'll get the update here on Thursday, but again, just looking for recent drought development to keep an eye on these things. Again, much of the southern and central plains here, isolated areas across the Southeast, isolated areas here in the Corn Belt. Haven't seen a huge increase up here in the northern plains. We'll keep an eye on this as we go through April. Have a different way to get severe weather alerts, whether that be weather radio or a charged phone. And Eric will be talking with you all tomorrow morning. Thanks for watching.